The countryside clinic was nothing like the places Alexander Hayes was used to. The walls were painted a dull beige, the furniture was mismatched, and the faint smell of antiseptic lingered in the air. It was a far cry from the sleek modern offices and luxury hotels he frequented. But here he was, sitting in the waiting area, scrolling through emails on his phone, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling that he didn't belong. Alex had come to this small town for a brief retreat, a rare break from his relentless schedule as the CEO of Hayes Tech, the billion-dollar tech empire he had built from the ground up. His assistant had insisted he take some time off after a particularly grueling quarter, and though he hated the idea of slowing down, he reluctantly agreed. He glanced around the room, his sharp suit and polished shoes standing out against the casual attire of the other patients. He was about to return to his emails when a familiar figure caught his eye. At first, he thought he was imagining it, but no, it was her, Claire Nolan, his ex-wife. She was standing at the reception desk, her back to him, wearing a simple nurse's uniform. Her hair was tied back in a loose bun, and though she looked tired, there was a quiet grace about her that he recognized instantly. Alex's heart stopped. It had been 7 months since their divorce, and he hadn't seen or spoken to her since. He had tried to bury himself in work, convincing himself that it was for the best. But now, seeing her here, in this small clinic, he felt a wave of emotions he wasn't prepared for. And then he noticed something else. Claire turned slightly, and that's when he saw it, the unmistakable curve of her belly. She was pregnant. Alex's mind raced. She had to be at least 8 months along. But how? Was the baby his? Why hadn't she told him? He stood up, his phone forgotten in his hand, and took a step toward her. But before he could say anything, Claire turned fully and saw him. For a moment their eyes met. Her expression was unreadable, calm, professional, but with a flicker of something he couldn't quite place. "Alex," she said, her voice steady but distant, "what are you doing here?" "I didn't know you worked here," he stammered, completely thrown off balance. Claire gave a small, polite smile, the kind she used to reserve for strangers. "I do, excuse me, I have patients to attend to." And just like that, she walked away, leaving Alex standing there, his mind spinning. He sat back down, his heart pounding. The questions swirled in his head. Why was she here? Why hadn't she told him about the baby? And most importantly, what was he supposed to do now? For the first time in years, Alexander Hayes, the man who always had a plan, felt completely lost. Alexander Hayes leaned back in the uncomfortable clinic chair, his mind racing as memories of Claire flooded in. It had been 7 months since the divorce, but the pain of it still lingered, buried under layers of work and distractions. Seeing her now, pregnant and working in a small-town clinic, brought everything rushing back. They had met 5 years ago at a charity gala in New York City. Alex had been the keynote speaker, a rising star in the tech world, already worth millions. Claire had been there as a volunteer nurse, helping organize the event. She wasn't like anyone he had ever met, grounded, compassionate, and unimpressed by his wealth. While others fawned over his success, Claire had asked him about his family, his hobbies, and what he did when he wasn't working. He had been captivated by her warmth and sincerity. Their romance had been a whirlwind. Within a year they were married, and for a while it was perfect. Claire brought balance to Alex's life, reminding him to slow down and enjoy the little things. She would leave him notes on his desk, cook his favorite meals when he came home late, and always made time to listen, even when he was too tired to talk. But as Hayes Tech grew, so did Alex's ambition. He became consumed by his work, chasing bigger deals, expanding the company, and securing his place as one of the most influential CEOs in the world. Late nights at the office turned into missed dinners, forgotten anniversaries, and broken promises. Claire tried to be patient, but the cracks in their marriage began to show. She had dreams of her own. Claire had always wanted to become a doctor, but she put those aspirations on hold to support Alex. She had believed in his vision, in their future together, But, as the years went on, she started to feel like a shadow in his life, someone he only noticed when it was convenient. The breaking point came a year ago. Claire's father had fallen seriously ill, and she had begged Alex to come with her to visit him in the hospital. It was a critical moment for her, and she needed his support. But Alex had been in the middle of negotiating a multi-billion-dollar merger and told her he couldn't leave. "This deal will secure our future," he had said, not realizing how hollow those words sounded to her. Her father passed away a week later. Alex had sent flowers but didn't make it to the funeral. Claire didn't say much at the time, but something in her had shifted. She stopped trying to reach out, stopped waiting for him to notice her pain. A few months later, she filed for divorce. Alex had been blindsided. He had thought they were just going through a rough patch, that she would understand his sacrifices were for their future. But Claire had made it clear she didn't want his money, his apologies, or his promises. She wanted a life where she wasn't second to his career. And now here she was, working as a nurse in a small clinic, visibly pregnant. Alex couldn't shake the thought. Was the baby his? If it was, why hadn't she told him? And if it wasn't, why did the idea of her moving on hurt so much? He ran a hand through his hair, frustration and regret bubbling to the surface. He had spent the last 7 months convincing himself that the divorce was for the best, that Claire deserved someone who could give her the attention she needed. But seeing her now, he realized he had been lying to himself. He still cared about her, and if the baby was his, he had a responsibility to be there for both of them. But how could he even begin to fix what he had broken? Alexander Hayes sat in his car outside the clinic, staring blankly at the steering wheel. He had come here for a routine checkup, but now his entire world felt like it had been turned upside down. Claire was here, pregnant, working as a nurse in a small-town clinic. He couldn't leave, not yet, not without answers. After a few minutes of gathering his thoughts, Alex stepped out of the car and walked back into the clinic. The receptionist, a cheerful older woman, greeted him with a smile. "Forgot something, Mr. Hayes?" He hesitated, unsure of what to say. "Actually, I was wondering if I could speak to one of your nurses, Claire Nolan." The receptionist's smile faltered slightly. "Nurse Nolan is very busy today. She's with patients." "I understand," Alex said, his voice calm but firm. "I'll wait." The receptionist gave him a curious look but nodded. "I'll let her know you're here." Alex sat down in the waiting area, his mind racing. He wasn't sure what he was going to say to her. He just knew he couldn't leave without at least trying to talk to her. After what felt like an eternity, Claire finally appeared. She looked tired but composed, her nurse's uniform slightly wrinkled from a long day of work. Her hand rested instinctively on her belly as she walked toward him. "Relax," she said, her tone neutral. "What are you doing here?" He stood up, suddenly feeling awkward and out of place. I didn't know you worked here. I was just—" He stopped himself, realizing how ridiculous he sounded. "I wanted to talk to you." Claire crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "About what?" He glanced at her belly, unable to stop himself. "You're pregnant." Her eyes narrowed slightly and she shifted her weight, clearly uncomfortable. "Yes, I am." "Is it?" He trailed off, unsure how to finish the question. Claire's expression hardened. "That's none of your business, Alex." His chest tightened. "None of my business, Claire, if that's my child?" She cut him off, her voice sharp but quiet enough not to draw attention. "If it's your child, you would have known months ago. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to. I don't need anything from you, Alex. Not your money, not your help, nothing." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. He had always known Claire was independent, but hearing her say it so bluntly stung more than he expected. "Claire, I'm not here to throw money at you or make excuses," he said, his voice softer now. I didn't know. I didn't know you were pregnant. I didn't know you were here. I didn't know anything." She sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. For a moment he thought she might let her guard down, but then she straightened up again. That's because you never asked, Alex. You were too busy with your company, your deals, your life, and that's fine. I've moved on. You should too. He opened his mouth to respond, but she held up a hand. I have patience to see. Please don't come back here. And with that she turned and walked away, leaving Alex standing there, feeling more lost than ever. As he walked back to his car, her words echoed in his mind. You never asked. She was right. He had been so consumed by his work, by his ambition, that he hadn't noticed her slipping away. And now, she was gone. But as he sat in his car staring at the clinic, he couldn't shake the feeling that he couldn't just walk away. Not this time. Alexander Hayes couldn't get Claire's words out of his head. You never asked. She was right, of course. He had spent years prioritizing his company, his deals, and his ambitions over everything else, including her. But now, seeing her again, pregnant and working herself to exhaustion in a small-town clinic, he couldn't just walk away. The next day, Alex found himself back at the clinic. He wasn't sure what he was hoping to accomplish, but he knew he needed to try again. This time, he waited outside, leaning against his sleek black car, watching as the sun dipped lower in the sky. It was nearly dusk when Claire finally emerged, her steps slow and tired. She didn't notice him at first, her hand instinctively resting on her belly as she adjusted her bag over her shoulder. Claire, Alex called out, stepping forward. She froze for a moment, then turned to face him, her expression a mix of irritation and exhaustion. What are you doing here, Alex? I thought I made myself clear yesterday. I know, he said quickly, holding up his hands as if to show he meant no harm. I couldn't leave things like that. I need to talk to you. Claire sighed, clearly not in the mood for a confrontation. I've had a long day, Alex. I don't have the energy for this. Please, he said, his voice softer now. Just give me 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. She hesitated, her eyes searching his face for a moment before she finally relented. Fine. 5 minutes. Alex gestured toward a nearby bench under a tree, and they sat down, the silence between them heavy. I didn't know you were pregnant, he began, his voice low. If I had known. You would have what? Claire interrupted, her tone sharp. Dropped everything? Walked away from your company? Don't lie to yourself, Alex. You wouldn't have done anything differently. Her words stung, but he knew she was right. Maybe I wouldn't have back then, he admitted, his gaze fixed on the ground. But I'm here now. I want to help. Claire let out a bitter laugh. Help? How, Alex? By throwing money at me? By swooping in and pretending to care now that it's convenient for you? It's not like that, he said, his voice firm. I know I screwed up, Claire. I know I wasn't there for you when you needed me, but I'm trying to make it right. She shook her head, her expression softening slightly but still guarded. You can't just show up after 7 months and expect to fix everything. It doesn't work like that. I'm not expecting anything, he said quietly. I want to understand. I want to know what happened after you left. I want to know how you ended up here. Claire hesitated, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. For a moment, Alex thought she might get up and walk away, but then she sighed and leaned back against the bench. I left because I couldn't do it anymore, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't keep waiting for you to notice me, to care about what I was going through. I needed to take control of my life again. She paused, her gaze distant. I sold the house, used the money to pay off my debts and enroll in a medical program. I've been working here ever since, saving up for when the baby comes. Alex felt a pang of guilt. She had done all of this on her own, without any help from him. You didn't have to do it alone, he said softly. Yes, I did, she replied, her tone firm. Because I couldn't rely on you, Alex. You were too busy with your company, your deals, your life, and I wasn't going to be a burden to you. You were never a burden, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Claire looked at him then, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and resolve. Maybe not to you, but that's how I felt. And I'm not going back to that, Alex. I've worked too hard to get here. He nodded slowly, realizing just how much he had underestimated her strength. "I understand," he said quietly. "But I'm not here to take anything away from you, Claire. I want to be part of this, if you'll let me." She didn't respond right away, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Finally, she stood up, her hand resting on her belly. "I don't know if I can trust you, Alex. Not yet." And with that, she walked away, leaving him sitting on the bench, more determined than ever to prove that he could be the man she needed him to be. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions for Alexander Hayes. Claire's words haunted him. "I don't know if I can trust you, Alex. Not yet." He knew she had every reason to doubt him, but he wasn't ready to give up. For the first time in years, Alex wasn't thinking about mergers or quarterly reports. He was thinking about her, about the life she was building, and about the child who might be his. But how could he prove to Claire that he had changed? Words wouldn't be enough. He needed to show her, through actions, that he was serious about being there for her and the baby. Alex started small. He hired a private investigator not to invade Claire's privacy, but to understand her situation better. He learned that she was living in a modest one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town, working double shifts at the clinic to make ends meet. She had no family nearby, no one to lean on. The thought of her going through this alone made his chest tighten with guilt. He decided to help, but carefully. Claire was fiercely independent, and he knew she wouldn't accept anything that felt like charity. So, he started with something simple: groceries. One evening, after Claire had left the clinic, Alex stopped by her apartment building. He left a box of fresh produce, baby supplies, and a handwritten note on her doorstep. The note read, "Claire, I know you don't want my help, but I want to do this for you and the baby. No strings attached. Just let me be here in whatever way you'll allow." The next day, he waited anxiously, wondering if she would acknowledge the gesture. When he didn't hear from her, he assumed she had ignored it. But later that evening, he received a text from an unknown number. "I don't need your help, Alex, but thank you." It wasn't much, but it was a start. Over the next few weeks, Alex continued to find small ways to support Claire without overstepping. He arranged for her apartment's heating system to be repaired after learning it had been acting up. He anonymously paid off her medical school tuition balance, ensuring she wouldn't have to worry about finances once the baby arrived. Claire, of course, was suspicious. She confronted him one evening outside the clinic, her arms crossed and her expression stern. "Alex, did you have something to do with my tuition being paid off?" she asked, her tone accusatory. He hesitated, then nodded. "I did. I just wanted to make things a little easier for you." She sighed, clearly frustrated. "I told you I don't need your money. I've been doing fine on my own." "I know you have," he said gently. "But you shouldn't have to do it all alone, Claire. I'm not trying to take over your life. I just want to help where I can." She studied him for a long moment, her expression softening slightly. "You can't just throw money at this, Alex. If you really want to be part of this, it's going to take more than that." "I know," he said, his voice steady, "and I'm willing to do whatever it takes." One evening, Claire's exhaustion caught up with her. She had been working a double shift at the clinic and was on her way home when she felt a sharp pain in her back. Panic set in as she realized she might be overdoing it. Alex happened to be nearby, waiting in his car to make sure she got home safely. When he saw her struggling to walk, he immediately rushed to her side. "Claire, are you okay?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. "I'm fine," she said through gritted teeth, clearly in pain. "You're not fine," he said firmly. "Let me take you to the hospital." She started to protest, but the pain was too much. Reluctantly, she let him help her into his car. At the hospital, the doctor assured them that the baby was fine, but warned Claire to take it easy. "You're overworking yourself," the doctor said. "You need to rest, or you're going to put yourself and the baby at risk." Alex stayed by her side the entire time, his worry evident. When they finally left the hospital, he turned to her, his expression serious. "Claire, you don't have to do this alone," he said. "Please, let me help. Let me be there for you and the baby." For the first time, Claire didn't argue. She simply nodded, her exhaustion too great to fight him anymore. From that moment on, things began to shift. Claire still kept her guard up, but she started to let Alex in little by little. He accompanied her to doctor's appointments, helped her set up the nursery, and even started cooking meals for her when she was too tired to do it herself. It wasn't easy. There were still moments of tension, moments when Claire doubted his sincerity, but Alex was patient. He knew he couldn't undo the mistakes of the past, but he could prove, through his actions, that he was committed to being a better man for her and for their child. One evening, as they sat together in her small apartment, assembling a crib for the baby, Claire looked over at him. "You've changed," she said quietly. He paused, his hands stilling on the screwdriver. "I'm trying," he admitted. "For you, for the baby, for us." Claire didn't respond right away, but there was a softness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Maybe," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "there's still a chance for us." Alex's heart swelled with hope. It wasn't a promise, but it was enough. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of rebuilding trust. Alexander Hayes knew that every step he took with Claire had to be measured, thoughtful, and genuine. She had been hurt before by him, and he couldn't afford to make the same mistakes again. Claire, for her part, was cautious. She had spent months building a life for herself, learning to stand on her own 2 feet. Letting Alex back into her life, even in small ways, felt like a risk. But as the days turned into weeks, she began to see a side of him she hadn't seen in years, a man who was present, patient, and willing to put her and the baby first. One evening, as the first snow of the season began to fall, Alex arrived at Claire's apartment with a bag of groceries. He had been stopping by regularly now, always careful to ask before doing anything. Claire had started to let her guard down, though she still kept a certain distance. "Dinner delivery," Alex said with a small smile as he stepped inside. Claire raised an eyebrow. "You know, I can cook for myself." "I know," he replied, setting the bag on the counter. "But you shouldn't have to. Besides, I've been practicing my lasagna recipe. You might actually like it this time." She smirked, a rare moment of lightness between them. "We'll see." As they worked together in the kitchen, the atmosphere felt different, comfortable. They talked about the baby. Claire had recently found out she was having a boy, and Alex asked about her plans for the nursery. "I was thinking something simple," she said, stirring a pot of sauce. "Maybe light blue walls, a few shelves for books. Nothing too fancy." Alex nodded, his mind already racing with ideas. "I could help with that. I know a great carpenter who could build custom shelves." Claire hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, that would be nice." It was a small moment, but for Alex, it felt like a victory. As Claire's due date approached, Alex became a constant presence in her life. He drove her to appointments, helped her prepare the nursery, and even attended a birthing class with her. One night, just as Alex was leaving her apartment, Claire suddenly doubled over in pain. "Alex!" she gasped, clutching her belly. His heart leapt into his throat. "Claire, what's wrong?" I think, it's time," she said, her voice strained. Without hesitation, Alex scooped her up and rushed her to the hospital. The next few hours were a blur of doctors, nurses, and anxious waiting. Alex stayed by Claire's side the entire time, holding her hand and whispering words of encouragement. When their son was finally born, Alex felt a wave of emotion unlike anything he had ever experienced. The tiny baby, swaddled in a blanket, was placed in Claire's arms, and for a moment, the world seemed to stand still. "He's perfect," Claire whispered, tears streaming down her face. Alex leaned over, his voice thick with emotion. "He's beautiful, just like his mom." Claire looked up at him, her expression soft. "Thank you, Alex, for being here." In the weeks after the baby's birth, Alex and Claire settled into a new rhythm. Alex was determined to be the best father he could be, and Claire, though still cautious, began to let him in more and more. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, the baby sleeping peacefully in Claire's arms, Alex finally worked up the courage to say what had been on his mind for months. "Claire," he began, his voice steady but nervous, "I know I've made a lot of mistakes, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for you, for our son, for as long as you'll let me be." Claire looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of emotions. "Alex, I've seen how hard you've been trying, and I can see that you've changed, but this isn't just about me anymore. It's about him." She glanced down at the baby, her expression softening. "If we're going to do this, it has to be for him, and it has to be real." "It is real," Alex said, his voice firm. "I love him, and I love you, Claire. I never stopped." For a long moment, Claire didn't say anything. Then, slowly, she reached out and took his hand. "Maybe," she said softly, "we can try again, but it's going to take time." Alex nodded, his heart swelling with hope. "I'll wait as long as it takes." Months later, Alex stood in the nursery, rocking his son to sleep. The room was exactly as Claire had envisioned: light blue walls, custom shelves filled with books, and a cozy crib in the corner. Claire appeared in the doorway, watching him with a small smile. "You're getting good at that," she said. He chuckled softly. "I've had a good teacher." She stepped into the room, wrapping her arms around him as they both looked down at their sleeping son. For the first time in years, Alex felt a sense of peace. He had spent so long chasing success, thinking it would make him happy, but now he realized that everything he had ever wanted was right here, in this room. A family. And this time, he wasn't going to let it slip away. The night their son was born was a turning point for both Claire and Alex. It wasn't just the arrival of a new life. It was the beginning of something neither of them had expected, a chance to rebuild what they had lost. As Claire lay in the hospital bed, cradling their newborn son, Alex sat beside her, his eyes fixed on the tiny baby in her arms. The room was quiet, save for the soft coos of the baby and the hum of the machines. For the first time in years, Alex felt completely at peace. "He's so small," Alex whispered, his voice filled with awe. Claire smiled faintly, her exhaustion evident, but her heart full. "He's perfect." Alex reached out hesitantly, his hand brushing against the baby's tiny fingers. When the baby instinctively wrapped his hand around Alex's finger, Alex felt a lump rise in his throat. "I can't believe he's ours," he said softly. Claire glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "It's still hard for me to believe you're here," she admitted. "A year ago, I never would have thought we'd be sitting here like this." Alex looked at her, his gaze steady. "I know I've made mistakes, Claire, but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." She didn't respond right away, her eyes dropping to the baby in her arms. "I want to believe you, Alex. For his sake, I really do." The first few weeks after the baby's birth were a whirlwind. Claire and Alex worked together to care for their son, navigating sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and the overwhelming emotions that came with being new parents. Alex threw himself into fatherhood with a determination Claire hadn't expected. He was there for every feeding, every late-night cry, every doctor's appointment. He even took time off from his company, a move that shocked his board of directors but made it clear to Claire that he was serious about his commitment. One night, as Alex rocked the baby to sleep, Claire watched him from the doorway. He looked so different from the man she had known before. So present, so attentive, so human. "You're good at this," she said softly, stepping into the room. Alex looked up, a small smile on his face. "I'm learning. He's a good teacher." Claire chuckled, sitting down on the edge of the bed. "I never thought I'd see you like this." "Like what?" he asked, gently placing the baby in the crib. "Like a dad," she said, her voice tinged with emotion. "You've changed, Alex. I can see it." He sat down beside her, his expression serious. "I had to change, Claire. Losing you was the wake-up call I didn't know I needed. I don't want to be the man I was before. I want to be better, for you, for him, for us." Claire looked at him, her heart conflicted. She wanted to believe him, but the scars of the past were still there. "It's going to take time," she said quietly. "I know," Alex replied, his voice steady, "and I'm willing to wait as long as it takes." As the weeks turned into months, Claire and Alex began to find a rhythm not just as co-parents, but as two people rediscovering each other. They started spending more time together, not just for the baby, but for themselves. One evening, Alex surprised Claire with a quiet dinner at her apartment. He had cooked her favorite meal, something he had learned to do during the months he had been trying to win her back. As they sat together at the small kitchen table, the baby sleeping peacefully in the next room, Claire found herself relaxing in his presence. "This is nice," she admitted, taking a sip of her wine. Alex smiled. "It is. I've missed this, just being with you." Claire hesitated, then nodded. "I've missed it too." For the first time in a long time, there was a sense of hope between them, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. One afternoon, as they walked through the park with their son in his stroller, Alex turned to Claire, his expression thoughtful. "Claire," he began, his voice hesitant, "I know we've been taking things slow, and I don't want to rush you, but I need you to know something." She looked at him, her heart pounding. "What is it?" "I love you," he said simply. "I've always loved you, and I know I've hurt you in the past, but I want to spend the rest of my life making it up to you. I want us to be a family not just for him, but for us." Claire stopped walking, her eyes filling with tears. She had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was here, she didn't know what to say. "Alex," she began, her voice trembling. He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "I'm not asking for an answer right now. I just needed you to know how I feel. I'll wait as long as it takes, Claire. I'm not going anywhere." For a long moment, they stood there in silence, the sounds of the park fading into the background. Finally, Claire nodded, a small smile breaking through her tears. "Maybe," she said softly, "we can try again." Alex's heart swelled with hope. "I'll do whatever it takes," he promised. As they continued their walk, their son cooing happily in his stroller, Claire felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. It wouldn't be easy, and there were still challenges ahead, but for the first time she believed that they could build something new, something stronger, something real. The decision to try again wasn't an easy one for Claire. She had spent so much time building a life for herself, learning to stand on her own, and protecting her heart from the pain of the past. But as the days turned into weeks, she began to see that Alex wasn't the same man he had been before. He was patient, present, and willing to put in the work, not just for their son, but for her. Alex didn't push Claire for more than she was ready to give. He focused on being the best father he could be, showing up every day and proving his commitment through actions, not just words. He spent hours with their son, learning how to soothe him when he cried, how to make him laugh, and how to be the kind of dad he had never imagined he could be. One evening, as Alex was feeding the baby while Claire cleaned up in the kitchen, she paused in the doorway, watching him. He was making silly faces, his voice soft and playful as he talked to their son. The sight made her heart ache in a way she hadn't expected. "You're really good with him," she said, stepping into the room. Alex looked up, a small smile on his face. "He makes it easy. He's a good kid." Claire sat down beside him, her gaze dropping to the baby. "I never thought I'd see this side of you." He hesitated, then said, "I never thought I'd have a reason to show it. But you and him, you've changed everything for me, Claire." She didn't respond right away, but the warmth in her eyes told him that his words had reached her. One weekend, Alex suggested they take a trip to the countryside. He had rented a small cabin by the lake, a quiet place where they could spend time together as a family. Claire was hesitant at first, but she eventually agreed, thinking it might be good for all of them to get away for a while. The trip turned out to be exactly what they needed. They spent their days walking along the lake, playing with the baby, and sharing quiet moments by the fire. For the first time in a long time, Claire felt like they were a team, like they were building something together. One evening, as the baby slept in his crib, Alex and Claire sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets and watching the stars. The air was crisp, and the only sounds were the gentle rustling of the trees and the distant call of an owl. "This feels nice," Claire said softly, her gaze fixed on the sky. Alex turned to her, his expression serious. "It does. I've missed this. I've missed you." She looked at him, her heart pounding. "Alex?" "I know," he said quickly, not wanting to push her. "I know it's going to take time, but I just want you to know that I'm here, for you, for him, for us." Claire hesitated, then reached out and took his hand. "I know you are, and I'm starting to believe that maybe we can do this." Alex's heart swelled with hope. He squeezed her hand gently, a small smile playing on his lips. "We can. I know we can." Over the next few months, Claire and Alex continued to rebuild their relationship. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when old wounds resurfaced. But they faced those challenges together. Alex was patient, never pushing Claire for more than she was ready to give. And Claire slowly began to let her guard down. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, the baby asleep in his crib, Claire turned to Alex, her expression thoughtful. "You've really changed," she said quietly. He looked at her, his gaze steady. "I had to. Losing you was the hardest thing I've ever been through. I don't ever want to go through that again." Claire hesitated, then said, "I'm scared, Alex. I'm scared of getting hurt again." "I know," he said softly, "and I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you that you don't have to be scared. I'm not going anywhere, Claire. I'm here for the long haul." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, let's try." The day Claire finally let Alex move back in was a quiet one. There was no grand gesture, no dramatic moment, just a simple conversation over coffee, where Claire told him she was ready to take the next step. As Alex carried his bags into the apartment, their son babbling happily in his arms, Claire felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't perfect, and there was still work to be done, but for the first time, she believed that they could build a life together, a real life, built on trust, love, and mutual respect. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, their son asleep in Alex's arms, Claire leaned her head against his shoulder. "I'm glad you came back," she said softly. Alex kissed the top of her head, his voice filled with emotion. "I'm glad you let me." As they sat there, the baby snuggled between them, Claire realized that they weren't just rebuilding their relationship, they were building a family. And for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful about the future.